welcome to another episode of the Snowies Camping Show. You are here with Ben and Lauren. And before we get into today's chat, make sure you have subscribed wherever you're listening to your podcast so you never miss another episode. And you've also jumped onto Facebook where we have our Snowies Camping Show there. We can get in on all the conversations happening around our episode, ask questions, all of that sort of stuff. Let us know what you want to hear in the future. So we have been blessed with some warm weather recently.
Yay.
And it's starting to get out of the dooms and glooms of winter, and we're chatting awnings and shelters generally for, out and about if you're at the picnic or the park, but also beach shelters and things as well, because it's something that a lot of people are either looking to replace or upgrade or get if they haven't already had one. It's you can't always be guaranteed of shade wherever you're going, can you?
No, the beach is a classic example. Unless you're in a palm-lined beach, then you're probably going to be you're going to be in the open, aren't you? So beach shelters for shade at the beach. But outback touring is another important area for shade, and we'll touch a little bit on vehicle awnings too, because sometimes on outback roads there might be a small tree, but it doesn't offer much shade. You might be able to find a riverbed or something, but sometimes you just need to pull over wherever you can and you need to just create some shade. So
sometimes also when you're sort of like rocking up to a campsite, especially one of those ones where it's like first in, first served, there might be spots left, but they're in undesirable sort of locations there, and
no shade left.
You need to create your own shade. Well, let's kick it off then in terms of, talking about vehicle shade options first and foremost. We've got sort of essentially a couple of different kinds of awnings. The first and one that sort of comes to mind, I think, for everybody's mind is just your standard pull-out awning, I think is what they're called. The most common sizes you get them is they usually pretty consistently pull out to about 2.5 meters, I'm pretty sure.
2 to 2.5 meters, thereabouts.
And then you can get them in like a 2 or 2.5 meter width as well. So and then they can be pretty handy because they're obviously lighter. You can. It's a little bit tricky to do it with one person, but you definitely can do it with one person. It's lighter. It's really simple, quick, easy setup. You can get accessories like side panel walls and things, and then a lot of brands still do like an awning tent, which is just like a cube tent that you can sort of Velcro and attach with the what do you call it? The sail track.
Oh yeah, on the end, yeah. So essentially, they're is kind of a frame with a canvas or something attaches in it, and the frame folds out and the canvas is kind of integrated. I've got one of those, or I had one of those in my car. I won't go into vehicle weights again, but I took it off to save on vehicle weights, and I'm kind of making a kind of a lightweight version out of just a tarp, but that's a little bit more mucking around to set up. But these the ones you refer to are, if you've got two people, are pretty easy to set up. And if you want to add, we had one and we added a screen room in underneath it when the kids were young and they didn't like all the bugs at night. So we'd sit in underneath there right next to the car. But I found them mostly useful for lunch stops where you just, you don't want to drive for another half hour, an hour trying to find the right tree to, sit under. You can just pull over in anywhere and I just dropped a pen. That was
I'm going to be in trouble for that.
He's just not going to be happy. Just set that up and you got a bit of shade on the side of the road. But there's some fancier versions
as well. The pull-out ones I think are a good option more for sort of day-to-day usage, like when you have drive on beaches and things like that, like down in South Australia at Aldinga or what have you, because they're just so quick and easy and sort of light, and they can go on smaller SUVs without too much trouble and things like that, and they're not a massive big thing to set up and put away. They're a really good sort of versatile all-rounder option.
Probably 10 to 15 kilos is your weight of those, but then you get up to the other ones we've got mentioned here, which are sort of 180 and 270 degree awnings, which kind of the same concept, but they have a pivot point with lots of I know Oztent call them spars or something, or extruded arms. Arms. They pivot round. The 360 awning would be like
a full
the center
circle
of the car right around, wouldn't it? 270, which covers all down the side of the car and then around to the rear as well. That's quite often got two brackets with all the arms pivots. So there's a whole lot more going on, a whole lot more fabric. There are some awnings out there that are freestanding in that respect, but generally you need to have uprights and guy ropes to peg it all down because you've basically got a massive
kite.
umbrella, a kite,
Yeah.
And if the wind picks up, then, the laws of physics come to play and something's going to give. And that could be your roof rack. It could be the brackets on the awning or maybe worse parts of your car, depending on how it's attached. So you generally do need to anchor it still, but you get heaps more coverage.
Yeah.
But they do weigh a lot more. Take a little bit more time to set up.
So the 180 ones will generally tend to just go down one side of your car, but like you mentioned, the 270 ones go back across the rear of your vehicle as well. And generally the 270-degree options are more for people who want to use that as a functional like awning or covered space when they're away camping and they're sort of setting up, because there is a fair bit of work to them in terms of when you're wanting to attach walls and things like that. But having that bit that comes all the way around the back of the car is good for people who want to access the back of their car, like if they've got four-wheel drives or utes with a canopy on them and they've got kitchen stuff and fridges in there and things like that. So in terms of sort of just your daily shade for trips and to the park or the beach or whatever, it's probably not going to be as functional. Still awesome though, but
you need a fair bit of space as well to set them up, because you've got your vehicle space. If you're using a tent as well, your campsite's going to be big because you're going to have your vehicle space. If you want to set up your 270 awning, you've got probably about 1.8 meters out down the side of the car and to the rear, and then room for your tent as well. So you're going to need a fair bit of space to set your camp up in that respect. A bit more mucking around. Probably in terms of whether you go 180 or 270, if you've got a vehicle with a lift up boot at the back.
Oh, like a hatch door.
Some of them, there are some brands that haven't got an arm at the back to kind of allow that door, like the boot, to open up and just sort of rest against the top. But some of them actually have an arm there and it will hit it. So that's probably the only thing I can think about if you want a 180 or a 270 is whether that 270, that last bit around the back of the car, is actually going to work.
Because that bit's quite low, isn't it? That last bit, like the bit that swings all the way around the back, I'm pretty sure that's the bottom extrusion.
It could be, because they're stacked, right? If there's three arms, they're on top of each other. So one's lower than the rest, and if that's the real one, then it gets in the way. So that's the only consideration there. But they do give you the most coverage, cost the most, weigh the most, more to set up. Bit much for what I have, but if you're constantly just driving down the beach and you want a massive amount of shade for the day, then probably not a bad option as long as you can anchor it down properly.
Definitely. So in terms of non-attached options, you've got things like your gazebo style shelters. So there's a couple of different kinds. I know that Zempire and Outdoor Connection do an air pole shelter where you don't actually have a physical frame. It's just the tubes of air that create the structure. And they can be really awesome, especially if you're wanting to go to the beach or somewhere where it's super windy, because they do move with the wind. Obviously, there's not like a rigid frame, as I think we've touched on that quite a few times across the podcast. So they can be a really good option. And then also you've got your classic Oz Trail style one that has the, what do you call it? It's like the scissor struts along the edge, and they sort of accordion in and out. And concertina, that's the word that I'm saying. These they can provide really excellent functional shade, especially if you're looking for a larger amount of shade, but they can be really heavy and really bulky. But I guess they're a good option that especially if you're wanting to add to it with your camping as opposed to just a day trip, you can set it up as an outdoor room, your kitchen space, you can put everything in there, and it's there. So if you want to do car trips and whatever, you're not locked into keeping your car there like you would with an attached awning.
Yeah, they're much more affordable too, those type of gazebos. In terms of use on the beach or anywhere really, if the wind catches them, because once again, you've got basically a massive like umbrella type thing. The wind's going to get under it. If the wind takes that and one of those framed one kind of disappears.
One of those framed ones is done. If the wind gets that and it's gone, it's done.
Rivets are gone. Things are bent. Yeah, it's all over.
It's going to crumple into a spiraling, what do you call them? Tumbleweed of steel.
Have you ever seen a few of them go at once where there's like a row of gazebos all kind of tied together and this one starts to go up and before you know it, the whole lot's peeled up and gone over the back and there's just this pile of sort of mangled steel. So that's where, and we'll talk a bit more on air poles I think either in a future or at some stage. We're hoping to
we're planning to have another chat with Zempire, I think, at some stage about that.
But the air pole ones are great because if they don't bend, right? I mean, I guess potentially they could burst, but the materials they use now are really good, and the whole thing just kind of flattens out and then bounces back up again. So it's much better for a windy sort of situation.
I reckon if you've got good pegs and you've pegged an air shelter into the ground, and from sort of its anchoring perspective, it's nailed down, a gust of wind comes, it would more likely, as you say, just flatten down and spring back up than it would to be ripped off the ground.
Yeah.
Whereas those heavier framed options, I shouldn't say heavier, because some of those air poles, because they
sort
don't –
fabric.
Yeah, they're fabric, but because they don't require a frame, they tend to be a lot larger and give you a lot more coverage. Like I think you can get 4.5 by 4.5 meters, I think, is sort of the standard size for that. Whereas because of the framed gazebos being that bit heavier, your standard size is like 3 by 3 meters.
Yep.
And that sort of – also, I guess the difference would be as well that because those air shelters use air poles, they're not like a big 3D cube. They're sort of more domed and curved. So you do have more of an aerodynamic sort of shelter. And I think you probably do get more functional shade space as well without the use of walls, because even as the sun moves, because it's like a curved structure, it gives you more area, I guess, against – what am I trying to say? It gives
it's got the steel ones have just got a cap on it, right? Whereas the other ones kind of come down the sides a little bit more.
That's right. And so it's coverage. Like if you've got like a normal Austrail gazebo and then the sun moves, you're going to get sun straight down through one of the sides unless you're putting a sun wall up. But there's sort of less chance of that, I reckon, with some of those
sort of arched,
more of the
walls.
domey style curved ones, especially with the air shelter ones.
I will make mention here before we go too much further, just the cross between kind of the gazebo and the 270 awning. I haven't done it yet, but I've been thinking a long time since I removed my awning about just using a tarp. I'm going to get 2 extra poles, some guy ropes, which I've already got in the car anyway, and just I'm not quite sure what the attachment side is, but just using the eyelets in the tarp to attach to my roof rack, and use 2 poles just to set up a really lightweight basic awning on the side of my car. And my mission there is to go from that 11 kilo awning that I've got down to maybe 2 or 3. Bit more mucking around to set it up, but just wanted to mention that.
Yeah,
I'll let you know how it goes.
Well, we actually do that. It's not lightweight, but we don't have any shelter or awnings or whatever. We've had awnings before, been there, done that. We have I'm pretty sure I've got this right, 6 by 8 meter canvas. We bought it from a business that supplies trucks and uses it as a cargo tarp, and we've made our own frame. It's essentially like an A-frame thing, but that gives us a huge amount of functional space. There's lots of flexibility with it as well. Like if it's super windy or like really, really cold or, any of that, we can drop the sides down quite low. If it's hot, then we have these poles that pitch it out and it's just got beautiful airflow, and we've attached it to the van before, but then we can set it up as a standalone thing. So it's really versatile.
That's what I was thinking too.
100% recommend it.
I'm not stuck to, because with the awnings we spoke about before, the 270, the 180 and the pull-out ones, it's on your car, and without a bit of mucking around to take it off and put it on the other side, you're stuck with it on that side of the car. Whereas if you just got it, I figure if I've got a way to attach this fairly easily to any side of my roof rack, I can put the shader on any side of the car. So I'm working that out at the moment. So,
it's pretty cool. I'll have to show you some photos of mine later.
Yeah, I'll check it out. Yeah. What have we covered off on?
We've sort of covered off on sort of more functional shelters for camping and possible day trips and things like that. But beach shelters, I think, is another one that's quite underrated, because I think a lot of people, or I don't know, I feel like beach shelters are one of those things that people will purchase with the intention that they're probably only going to last a year, because they they often will tend to be like flimsy or, easily broken or windy, or you see them being blown down the beach a lot of the time. But it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And there's a couple of different kinds. You can get like your pop-up shelters, and you can get like stretchy fabric ones. Outdoor Connection also do, I think it's got a Fiesta shelter or something, but you've got it. It's like
I can't think of the name of the fabric, but it is a stretchy, not neoprene.
Like a lycra like a swimmy wear type.
That's right. Yeah, I mean the big thing with beach shelters is the wind, right? So there are pop-up frames that have got, bending, folding knuckles and semi-rigid frames, and they go up really easily. But if you do get caught out in really bad weather or consistent winds, which, let's face it, at the beach, that's happens on a regular basis. If you haven't got it anchored or tied down or set up properly, it can flex and bend, and sometimes things break, and once it breaks, it becomes useless and you need a new one.
Yeah.
I really like these because it is literally just a massive square or rectangle of Lycra. Mm-hmm. And you're laughing about something.
It's all good. Keep going.
And just on the corners of that, there's no sewing or anything. It's just the fabric's bunched up and the rope's just tied to the corner of the fabric.
So it's like a sand anchor.
And well, that's on the actual Lycra fabric, but then on the other end, there's this little balloon of Lycra and a hole, so you can use a peg or you can just fill the whole thing, and it stretches right out. Right, you can fit heaps of sand in there and bury that in the sand. So setting that up on the beach. Now I've set up quite a few beach shelters in the videos and things that we do for Snowies, because we sell heaps of beach shelters.
Yeah, totally.
And the ones that have got frames where you kind of need to balance it and then put a peg in are a right pain in the bum when it's windy, right? Because it just keeps blowing over. You put that in, that peg pulls out while you're putting that one in, and then you're back and forward and you're frustrated before you've even settled down for the beach. Mm-hmm. This one, you lay it out, stretch it out, bury the four corners, and it's flat on the ground. It's not blowing anywhere, right? It's just flapping around a little bit on the ground. And then you get these two poles that have got this.
I'm just watching all your hand movements. I don't know. It's making me happy.
And the poles have got this foam ball on the top. So once you've got the four anchors in place, you just get these poles, put them underneath, lift it up, put the poles there.
And it's sort of stretchy, so you don't have to worry about tensioning and things like that.
And you can put the poles in different spots. So if the sun's coming from one direction, you can put them more on one side. And as the sun moves, you can easily move the poles during the day. I'm probably overselling it, but I really like that just for the simplicity. And when it packs up, it's just a small, it's a small package that just goes in my camp kit.
That's really awesome.
I really like that one for the simplicity, and things just can't break in it. You can add more poles to it if you want, put 4 poles, and you've always got a gazebo. Yep. So I really like those ones. But
that's really good.
We do sell heaps of like little pop-up ones that go really easily. Got that traditional kind of A-frame.
The retro one?
Retro A-frame, yeah.
That's the one that I've got actually, and it's not sort of as flexible in terms of, because it's not stretchy, you can't just sort of set it up and peg it up and put your poles in and expect it to be perfect. But mine is, it's like yellow and white stripy. Actually got it from Snowies like I'd easily say 10 years ago, but I didn't work here then, but one of my friends did, and she got it for me for my birthday.
Oh, nice.
And and I reckon they're probably one of the most popular shelters that we sell, because you get a huge amount of shade from them, from literally just a big rectangle of fabric that's rolled up. The only real bulky thing that you've got to worry about is the poles. And you can get ones with steel poles, but mine's got aluminium poles. They do have a reputation though for being dodgy in wind. And I mean, most beach shelters do, but these ones in particular, everyone's always like, they're useless. Don't worry about them in the wind or whatever. The best decision that I ever made was to ditch the pegs that they came with and buy these. I know it sounds hardcore. I know
where you're going with this.
I know it sounds hardcore, but they're steel galv right angled pegs.
You've gone on about these I think we had a peg episode a while ago.
I love them so much. I love them for literally everything. And we just have 4 of them in with the bag, and there has not been a day at the beach where everybody else has packed up their shelters, or shelters are rolling off down the beach and people have just gone home, and we've just been sitting there happily in like gale force winds because these pegs just do not budge, and the shelter holds up to it because it's the pegs that essentially are the problem.
Yeah.
And similarly to what you're saying, because it's got multiple different holes in it and the way that you can set it up, you just get shade all throughout the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
I think that if you've got 2 people to set them up, it's easy too, because you just need someone to hold that frame in the middle while the other person puts the pegs in.
Yeah.
But you know that thing with the wind, it's a common question we get, right? Not just with beach shelters, but with tents as well. How well does it hold up in the wind?
Mm-hmm.
In reality, it comes down to common sense and how you've pitched it.
Yeah.
No matter what shelter you're using. If it's an enormous shelter with a massive side or something on it that's going to catch a lot of winds, it's without it being pegged down really well, it's not going to handle the wind very well.
I know, especially those little like dome tent pop-up ones where you go in the front and the rest is all walls and whatever. If there's an onshore wind or an offshore, I don't know what is it when the wind's coming onto the shore. Is that called onshore? Or is that offshore? Because it's off the shore.
Onshore, yeah.
Anyway,
offshore
wind that's coming
when it's going off.
Well, I didn't know if offshore wind was when the wind was coming off the shore. Does that make sense?
Offshore is wind
and
coming
onto
off
you.
the shore.
Yeah. But
anyway, that's another topic.
No, but I'm going to get to the bottom of that so I don't sound like an idiot every time I try
offshore,
to use those terminologies.
So the wind is – no, I won't go down that path. Anyway.
I can see your brain being like, right. But anyway, those things are essentially like a balloon. And they're just going to fill up with air and just
got a pocket
go off into the atmosphere unless they're pegged down properly. And it's not usually people just say, oh, I'll put a couple of handfuls of sand in these pockets. No, it's not going to work.
The forces of the wind on the fabric are enormous if the wind's strong enough. So,
And there are some really awesome, lightweight, compact beach shelters out there, but you do need to really be equipped to make sure they're being anchored properly.
And by that, it also means even if it's a lightweight shelter and you've anchored the guy ropes properly, but the guy ropes are only attached to the shelter in a lightweight manner, then the pegs might stay in there, but the guy ropes might come off. So you got to have You're still laughing about my hand movement here?
No, because I just thought to myself, I've just gotten so into this conversation. I haven't even bothered to look at the show notes that we've got here. No. And then when I did look at the show notes, I read this thing, beach umbrellas, and then instantly I was thinking, what do you think about beach umbrellas in my head? And then I remembered my friend Nick, when we went to the beach one day, I have this amazing photo of her standing there with her umbrella, which is completely gone inside out. It's this huge, big inverted beach umbrella, and she's like, huzzah. Yeah. That just came to my head and I was just having a giggle while I was listening.
I found it strange that umbrellas are a beach thing, right? They look good on the beach, but in terms of the whole how they're engineered and how they come together, a calm beach day is fine, but a windy beach day, an umbrella's not good.
I think they're just the ultimate OG beach shade.
OG?
Like original.
Original, okay.
Yeah. They're just the original beach shade, from back when we didn't have the technology to come up with all sorts of other things. And I think that's why those sort of other stripy retro style fabric with the things, they're also quite retro because they're just simple and they're basic. But you're right. I don't think I've ever had a successful umbrella beach shade trip.
No, I've seen them tumbling down the beach like a spear.
Yeah, or they invert, or the ones that you can unscrew in the middle and angle, they just keep falling down on people, or you can't get them deep enough in the sand or what have you. I mean, we sell a ton of them. We sell so many umbrellas. It's ridiculous. Yeah. But I just personally haven't ever had much success with them.
You said butt ton.
Did I?
Anyway, move on.
Terrible habits.
I think they look good, right? And it's they're easy to set up. But once again, it goes back to that common sense thing. If it's a windy day and you've got an umbrella, it's a big, large catchment for the wind. And if you haven't got it anchored down, it's going to take off. Yeah. So, hopefully it doesn't hurt anyone along the way.
Yeah. They're colourful though. They can be colourful and really pretty.
Yeah, those raffia ones. They look right.
Yeah, they do. They make you feel like you're going to be served a pina colada at any stage.
Just keep waiting.
Yeah.
There are some shelters. Oztent is one. I think last year was the first time we saw them, and they fold up quite small, but they pop out. The sides kind of invert.
Are you talking about the Malamoo series?
Malamoo, sorry, that's the one. Yeah, which is an Oztent brand. And I was quite impressed by those because they pitched tightly and. Just the way they when they popped out, they kind of support themselves a fair bit.
The cube one, I was quite impressed with that because when I first sort of saw it, I was like, I don't know about that. That's going to be pounded in about half an hour at the beach, but it's not. It's actually really good.
Well, they're curved on the outside, so you got that little bit of aerodynamic sort of nature to it, and they're quite rigid once they pop out, but they pack up quite small. So that's probably the one that I would trust the most in heavier winds, if that's what you need. But I guess at the end of the day, you try not to go to the beach on a really windy day anyway, aren't you? So
I think sometimes you can't actually help it though. Like I don't know about you, especially in South Australia, so other states might be totally different. But there's a point in the afternoon, it's sort of around like 2 or 3 o'clock where you get wind. It's not avoidable. It can be like the most gloriously still glass water day, and then that time in Adelaide comes and the wind's on. So it depends if you're sort of there for a whole day or what your vibe is. mean, we usually, if we're going to the beach, we'll be there for hours and hours and hours. So I think that's at the end of the day why we chose to invest in those pegs. We did actually have them in our kit anyway. And then my partner was like, oh, let's give these a try. And now they're just permanently in there.
Yeah. Okay.
So and as I said, our shelter's been up for, 8 to 10 hours at the beach without any hassles.
Yeah, okay. Well, I've set ours up, that stretchy one I was talking about, pretty windy weather before, just next to the car. And, just anchor it down and it's an easy one.
I think the other thing probably worth mentioning is I think those sort of with the considerations that we've talked about with anchoring it down and making sure it's secured properly, shelters like yours and mine, which are the huge, big, large fabric ones, depending on how many people you've got, they can actually give you quite a large amount of shade. Like I find that ours, we've, as I've said lots of times, I've got a family of 6 and often we'll go down with, friends who might add an extra 2 or 3 or 4 people. And generally that's enough to provide all of us with the shade that we need. And it's like a fraction of the size of a gazebo alternative. It's lighter. You can just string it on your shoulder if you have to walk, 200, 300, 400 meters to your spot on the beach or whatever. They're a good option. Whereas I think some of those smaller pop-up options, like we've got a Australia shade tent here on the desk, like that's quite small and it's compact, but you probably wouldn't get that many people in there. Like the shade itself isn't super functional.
They're a bit hotter too, I think, when they've got enclosed sides, whereas the A-frame ones or what I use, they're open on the sides. So you've got the shade from the top and you've got the airflow underneath. So, quite comfortable to sit under. So, and all this applies to the campsite too.
Yeah, totally.
About beach, but I take my beach shelter when we're camping and that's either for the beach or in the campsite if I need extra shade. So,
that's good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Hope that was some useful insights into our thoughts.
Yeah, on shelter and shade options, whether you're camping or hitting the beach leading into summer. Now we're going to have some awesome weather apparently this season.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
I think some of the weather dudes in South Australia anyway have predicted a wet spring.
Really?
Wetter spring than usual, but also warm. So I think possibly we might be having a bit more of a humid time down here in SA this year.
They can get it wrong, can't they? They're the people that can get their job get their job wrong each day and still come back the next day.
The horror on your face right now. Oh, thanks so much for joining us again, folks. Hopefully that's given you a bit of food for thought with either upgrading or choosing a shelter for you this summer. Let us know all of your adventures that you're taking in this warmer weather. Shoot us through some photos if you like to our Snowy's Camping Show Facebook group. That's it for this week. We'll see you again next time.
See you later.